Hi, everyone. So, it is Saturday, and we call it Holy Saturday. And a lot has happened since last Sunday. And originally, I wasn't necessarily going to see you, but then I thought I would really like to tell you the story of what's happened in the last week since I told the story of Jesus coming into Jerusalem and all of the people yelling, Hosanna in the highest, um, hail to the King of David. And remember, when people tell stories, sometimes they tell them differently, and we even read different chapters in the Bible, and they're all different versions of the same story. Some things might be slightly different, some things might be the same, and that is the beauty of storytelling, of the fact that all of these stories were told from one person to the other. Remember, the disciples spread the word, and then they told people, and other people told other people, and then finally people started writing down the stories. So sometimes the stories are different. This is the way I tell the story, and hopefully I'll remember everything that I want to share with you. So we're going to start with last Sunday, and hopefully you can see me with the sun that's setting. And remember, Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, and they were yelling, Hosanna in the highest, and all the people were crowding around, and they threw palms down in their cloaks as he was entering the city. And when he got there, that's where I ended the story. And that was on Sunday. And I've got the days of the week all here. And some of the days, it may be slightly different, but in order to make it easier, I did break it down into days because there are a lot of things that happened. And when he came to Jerusalem, the next day, he came into the temple and he was so upset because they were trading and they had money and there was lots of things going on in the courtyard. And Jesus was so upset, he said, this is a temple, this is a place where we worship. Why do you have money? And he was even so angry, and I'm not sure I've ever heard of a story of Jesus being this angry. He even knocked over some of the tables so the money fell off. And the chief priests and the traders who were there, they said, who are you to do this? And the children were calling him the King of David. And he said, you may not do this. And they cleared away, and he started to tell stories about God and about things that made sense to people, and people stayed and listened in the temple. And that is, the temple is like a church, and he really wanted to honor the fact that it was a place to share stories and to grow and to learn. So that was, I'm going to call it on Monday. On Tuesday, Jesus was at his friend's house, and we've heard about his friends Martha, Mary, and Lazarus before. And he was at their house. They were sisters and brother. And when he was there with all of the disciples, Mary took some oil, and it was a very, very special oil. It came from India and to Palestine. And it was such a special oil. It was so expensive. And she picked up the vessel that it was in, the container, and she broke it. And she started to wash Jesus's feet with this very expensive special oil. And Judas was there, and he was very angry, and he said, why are you doing this? That oil could feed people. It's so expensive. With the amount of money, if you sold it, it could feed lots of people. And Jesus said, leave her. You do not get angry with her. This is something that's very special that she's chosen to do. Please do not be angry. And Judas stayed angry, and he stayed so angry that he left. And he went to see the chief priests, and he made an arrangement with them. He said, how much will you give me if I help you to get Jesus? And the priest said, we'll give you 30 coins, gold coins or silver coins. And so pretend these are silver. And he took the money, and he told them, when I kiss whoever I kiss, I will kiss Jesus, and that will be the sign that he is the one that you are supposed to arrest. And so that's the end of Tuesday, when he had his feet washed, and Judas was so angry about it, and then went and made an arrangement to have him arrested. And then on Wednesday, Jesus said to James, and he said to Peter and John, he said to them, we need to find a place to have our Passover meal. I would like you to look for a man who's carrying a jug of water on his head, and follow him to the house where he leads you, and he will go upstairs. And back in those days, the very special room to entertain people was always upstairs. So he said, follow the man upstairs, and he will lead you to a dining room. And please prepare the dining room for a Passover meal. Because remember, that's why Jesus and the disciples had arrived in Jerusalem, to have the Passover meal. And the Passover meal is a very, very special meal for our Jewish friends. They still have Passover, and they've just finished celebrating Passover on, they had it on Wednesday night. Sorry, what day is it? It's Saturday. They had it, Wednesday night and Thursday night. No, Thursday night and Friday night, I think. And it is a meal that is it shows symbolism, signs of what happened to the Jewish people. And if you remember in the Bible, we talked about in the Old Testament how Moses, God came down and he said, you need to have our people freed. And Moses said, let my people go. And the Pharaoh would not let them go. And so he finally did with the 10 plagues. Remember, there were these horrible plagues, 10 different things that happened. And the plate that our Jewish friends have on to celebrate Passover, and remember, Passover is the Seder plate, and on the Seder plate they have an egg, which describes that new beginnings happen, lettuce, which is bitter, and it reminds reminds them of the bitterness of how long they were in slavery, the Jewish people. Horseradish, the same thing. Um, the bitter herbs that they have is also a symbolism. And then they have a mixture, a paste of wine that they mix in with apple and walnuts, and they mix it together, and it represents the mortar, the type of substance that they used to make bricks and to seal the bricks together when they were slaves, and they had to build and do so much building for the Egyptians. And the last piece is a bone, and it symbolizes the lamb that they killed, and they put the blood on their doors. And that last plague, remember, killed the sons of the firstborn sons of all the families that did not have lamb's blood up on the door. And so this meal symbolizes it. And Jesus came to Jerusalem to share this meal with his disciples. And as he was, before he sat down to have the meal, he took water, and he proceeded to pour water over each of his disciples' feet, and he washed the feet of each and every one of them. And then when they asked him about it, he said, "We are all the same. Nobody is more special than somebody else. And all of you now, I want you to wash each other's feet." And he wanted to show that everybody's equal. Nobody is better than one or the other. And when they were done washing their feet, it is Thursday now, and the sun set, and just at sundown is when you start sharing your Passover meal with one another. And Jesus said, "Take this bread." He broke it, and he said, "Take this bread. It is, take and eat it. This is my body." And he shared it with everybody at the table, all of his disciples. And then he blessed the wine, and he poured it, and he said, "Drink this, for this is my blood." And he shared it with everybody. And then as they sat to share their meal, he said, "One of you is going to betray me." And they were all shocked, and his face was so sad. And Peter said to the disciple sitting next to him, "Ask who it will be." And that disciple said, "Who will it be?" And Jesus said, "It will be the person who I hand this bread to." And he handed the bread to Judas. And Judas looked so shocked. And Jesus said to Judas, "Be quick, go now, do what you must do." And Judas ran away. He left immediately, and he went into the night. And then they continued their meal. And Jesus said, "Come with me to Peter, James, and John." And he said, and they went to the garden as they went into the garden, he said to the three of them, I am going to go over there and pray, and I do not want you to fall asleep. Please stay with me. And he went to the garden, to another spot, and he prayed. He was praying to God his Father. And all three, James, Peter, and John, fell asleep. And Jesus came back and he woke them and he said, I asked you not to fall asleep. And they said, oh, he said, stay awake. I need you. Be with me. He said, I'm going to go and pray again. Please stay awake. And their eyes got heavy and they fell asleep again. And Jesus came back again and he said, I asked you not to go to sleep. I asked you to stay awake, to be with me. And they said, we will. And he went back over and he started to pray. And a third time, they fell asleep. And he came over and he said, I asked you to be with me. I asked you not to go to sleep. And just then, and a little bit, he took Peter aside and he said, you will betray me 3 times before the cock crows. Another word for cock is a crow, is not a crow, is a rooster. And roosters go cock-a-doodle-doo before, just as the sun is about to rise, a couple of hours before the sun rises. And Peter said, I will not do that. And Jesus said, you will. And just as he was finishing saying that, all of a sudden, all these people came. And one of the people who came was Judas. And just as Jesus had said, and just as Judas had agreed with all of the chief priests, he went over and he gave Jesus a kiss. And the guards came and they took Jesus away. And they took him away, and they got him ready to put him on the cross. And just as Jesus had said to Peter, first a little girl came up to Peter and said, aren't you one of Jesus's friends? And Peter said, no, I'm not. And then a young girl servant came up to him and said, aren't you a friend of Jesus's? I thought I saw him with you. And Peter said, no, I am not. And then a crowd of people gathered around him and said, you have the same accent as somebody from Galilee. You are one of his disciples. And Peter said again, no, I am not. And just as he finished saying that, the cock crowed, cock-a-doodle-doo. And Peter knelt down and he began to sob because he had denied that he knew Jesus 3 times, just as Jesus had said before the cock crowed. And so the sun was rising and they were getting Jesus ready. And they started to mock him, and they made a crown of thorns, and they put it on his head. And do you think thorns felt good? They were making a joke of it. They were saying, you're king of the Jews, you're king of the Jews. And they put this crown on that must have been incredibly painful with the thorns. And they put him in a purple robe. And again, they said, King of the Jews. And Jesus just bore all of it. He didn't cry or do anything. And then, as they got him ready, they then brought him over, and they took off the purple robe, and they took off the crown, and they got him ready. And Pontius Pilate said to him, "Are you king of the Jews? Are you the Lord's son?" And Jesus said, "Yes." And Pontius Pilate, even though his job was to put him on the cross and to have him crucified, did not want to. And he said again, "Are you, Jesus, are you the Son of God?" And he said, "I am." And Pontius Pilate still wanted to give him the chance to not be crucified. And it was the custom in the past during Passover for the Jewish people to let one prisoner go. And he said to the crowd of people who had gathered, "Do you want me to let this person go?" And the chief priests had convinced all the people to crucify him. And so they yelled, "Crucify him." And Pontius Pilate had no choice, but he did wash his hands beforehand because he wanted to wash away the sin that he was about to do. And he put him on the cross. And he was put on the cross at about 9 o'clock. And as he was put on the cross, 9 o'clock went by, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and suddenly it became dark. And the sun disappeared. And as the sun disappeared, Jesus started to die. And he yelled out. 12 o'clock went by, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 hours went by, and he yelled out, and then his head went down and lowered, and he had died. So it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he had died, and all the while he was on the cross, there were 3 women. And you hear a lot of the same names in the Bible. And one of the names that you hear a lot about is Mary, and another name is Joseph. And Mary was here, his mother. Mary was here, Mary Magdalene, his friend, and then Mary, who was the mother of James, was there as well. And they stood by and stayed with Jesus the whole time he was on the cross. And then 2 men came up to Pontius Pilate, and they said to him, one of the men was Joseph, a wealthy man from Arimathea, so not Joseph, Jesus' father, but another Joseph. And then Nicodemus asked Pontius Pilate, "Can we take him and can we prepare him?" and bury him. And Pontius Pilate said, yes, you may. And so they carried him, they took him off of the cross, and they carried him, and they prepared his body, and they wrapped it, they washed it down with aloe and myrrh. Remember, myrrh was an oil that they brought Jesus when he was born. It's a special oil. And then they wrapped him in a cloth, and they wrapped his face in the cloth as well. And here was the oil, and that is where my story ends for tonight, with them getting him ready to bury him. And then we will come to Saturday. And I will stop this film now. And the next one will be about Holy Saturday and leading to Easter.